Well, Dom, I'm so glad you could join me today. How have you been?
I'm good. Yeah, one day at a time. Busy.
Yeah, I mean, now that Bullet Train's done, I mean, I'm sure you wrapped your score up a little while ago. Are you taking a little break, or are you already on to the next project?
Already on to multiple things. Yeah, it's no rest for the wicked. But I prefer it that way. It's much better that way. Keep busy.
And are any of those projects you can talk about, or is it still too early where they're all under wraps?
No, all good. I mean, I'm doing 2 Christmas movies. One's already finished. One's a musical, a Pascal and Paul musical, starring Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, wow.
It's a sort of retelling of A Christmas Carol, but with a twist. So that's really fun. And I'm just doing the score on that, obviously, because Pascal and Paul are doing the songs. So pressure was off a little bit on that. I could just write nice Christmas music in the background and not have too much pressure. And then I'm also doing a movie called Violent Night, which is produced by 87 North, which is David Leitch and Kelly McCormick's production company. And that starring Dave Harbour as Santa Claus. And it's kind of a cool mix of Die Hard and Home Alone all kind of smushed into one. So
Interesting.
that's super fun. And then I'm doing a TV show as well. So, yeah, it's busy. I can't say the TV show is called Kaleidoscope, but I can't say much more than that. It's a heist thing. That's all I can say.
All right, cool. So would you have actually been open to doing the lyrics if they asked you to, or for the musical? Would you have been? No, that's
I'm
far.
down. I'm down for anything. I love writing songs. I wrote a few songs for Bullet Train and produced songs on Bullet Train as well. So yeah, I mean, I'd actually love to do a musical. It took me to my adult years to get into musicals. As a kid, I wasn't really into it. I always get annoyed when my grandma would want to take me to a musical. But now I kind of, I definitely listen to them a lot more and I watch them a lot more. So I'd be up for it for sure.
All right. Yeah, I mean, and I was the same way. I was never a huge musical fan, and then I watched West Side Story, the Spielberg's rendition. I was like, this is when they're done well, like absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that's for me. That's sort of more of a. I mean, it's almost on opera classiness of. I mean, that's just that nothing will ever beat West Side Story.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people were annoyed about redoing it when the original is already so good, but
right,
you can't
Spielberg,
have it in better hands.
I mean, right, exactly.
Who's to say that Spielberg shouldn't make a project he wants to make?
Right, he should make whatever he wants to make, and he
so,
does.
Yeah, and I'm glad. We're all better off for it.
Yeah.
And obviously, I haven't heard this music. I don't even know if it exists yet. But I did want to ask, because I'm always curious when I hear like Christmas scores. Like, what's the challenge, or how do you get over the challenge of making something that sounds like Christmassy without it also sounding like the majority of other Christmas music that's been released previously?
It's so hard, and I think that's such a good question because it's literally what I've been dealing with for the past 6 months. And you get the constant pressures of like, we really want the next Christmas classic. We want it to be like Home Alone. You're like, all right, well, no pressure. But I think, you're sort of bound by the orchestra in a way. You can throw in little things to sort of offset that. John Debney did a fantastic job with Elf with like using slightly different instrumentation and sort of pushing it out of that just classical, Polar Express Home Alone-y thing. But I think what it boils down to essentially is melody and the strength of the melody because, like all classical music and most film music before the 80s, you had an orchestra and that was all you had, and you had to make that sound original. So, and more often than not, it was done with melody and memorable melodies. So that's what I've tried to do with these Christmas movies. Whether I succeeded or not, I mean, I'm sure people will tell me, but that was sort of how, I mean, that was the only way I could see to get that Christmas feeling and for it to be memorable. The only way to do that was with melody.
Oh, very cool. I'm looking forward to them. So my ears will be open.
Okay, great.
And I'm gonna make the most labored transition possible. But because you mentioned John Debney's score for Elf, which I think is fantastic, but it's also a score that, for maybe the first 2/3 of the film, is almost not even there because there are so many licensed tracks.
Right.
And
True.
then he kind of has to battle with those, or not battle, but work around them.
Yes.
Bullet Train is similar in a lot of ways, where there are a lot of overt license tracks throughout the film that you have to work around. And then, what surprised me watching the film and then re-listening to your score, that a lot of what I thought was licensed tracks was actually, completely original.
Right.
And so, I mean, can you walk me through that process?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, right from the beginning, I came on the project before a frame was even shot. So David and I sat down, and Staying Alive was already part of the canvas. Holding Out for a Hero was already part of the canvas. And I ended up producing Staying Alive, which really, it gave me a really good sort of window into where I wanted to be, and in that sort of 70s world, and then to bring that 70s world up to date with the score. But my first thing to David and Kelly was like, what's the perfect needle drop? So often we have needle drops that work for 20 seconds and they don't work, and then they work again, and it's a constant battle to get needle drops that fit the picture. So why don't we just get rid of that, and why don't I just write original stuff that sounds like needle drops, but it's actually got theme in it, it's telling story, it's doing everything you want from a needle drop, yet you're tying everything together, and it's custom made. And for want of a better pun, that was music to their ears, and it was gangbusters from the get go. So yeah, I mean, that was the idea, and obviously you do have certain needle drops that I haven't done. There are some I produced, like the Engelbert Humperdinck, I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles, Staying Alive, and then I wrote the Kill Me Pretty for Tami Okuda, and I did a version of I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles. So me being part of the songs in such a huge way made it easier to transition from song to score. Also, me being a vocalist as well, it was like, what's the biggest part of a song? The vocal line. So the vocals being a big part of the score as well really helped transition from score to song and back.
So are those your vocals in all of the score songs?
Yeah, that's all me. Going crazy during the height of the pandemic, just the mad scientist in his lab, just grabbing instruments and singing and being crazy. So yeah.
So you've done vocals on other projects that you've scored as well, and I think there's something more personal about having your voice out there versus you playing guitar or cello or something that appears out there. Does having your voice appearing in a film that tens of millions of people are going to see or have seen, like, ever kind of weigh on you or worry you, or at this point are you like, no, I'm all for it?
I mean, I'm all for it. I'm an attention seeker at heart. So, I mean, there was a point where I wanted to be a vocalist, whether it was the frontman of a band or that, that's what I wanted to do. As a kid, I was, my next door neighbor was a film composer, TV composer, and he would do commercials and he would get me to sing on them. And, I've been in that world a lot. I was a boy chorister, and so I'm very comfortable singing. My mum is a singer. So I've always wanted to do that. I've always it's my go-to show-off move. If I need to show off, I start singing. So yeah, I mean, for good or for bad, I'm very comfortable singing and having people listen to me sing. So it was just sort of a good excuse to put that in the score. And as I said, it was a really good blending of song and score to have that vocal stuff go through, and for it to feel like a song at times when it is score. Like you said, when you were listening, you thought it was a needle drop when actually it was score. So it being pandemic, I'm able to sing and to sort of manipulate my voice in different ways. Like at one minute I can be sort of choir boy-esque, and the next minute I can be screaming like a 70s rock star. Or I fortunately have that ability to kind of mold my voice into different shapes and sizes. So it was really useful, just like being in the lab and just like grabbing the mic and going, okay, I'm going to do this now, and then I'm going to do this now. And oftentimes it's a scratch, thinking that, especially when I'm doing a song, it's a scratch, thinking that some other artist is going to come along and do it. And I've been fortunate enough that, a couple of times directors have liked my scratch and kept it. That's what happened with Lurch in the Addams Family too. I did a favor for Jessica Weiss, who produced that song for the for the movie, and she said, "Oh, would you sing this? We need a scratch. Like, we've got to get this done." I was like, "Yeah, sure. Come over to the studio. We'll do it." So he did it, sent it to Conrad, and he loved it, and he wanted to keep it. So I'm Lurch in that movie, so that was kind of cool.
That's cool, and I actually had Jess on maybe last year for Cinderella.
Right.
Yeah, so she's great. I loved having her on.
Oh, she's great. She's wonderful.
And don't worry, I won't ask you to show off in front of everybody.
Yeah, I'm fighting a bit of a cold right now, so that's probably not a good idea.
Oh, that's a convenient excuse.
Yeah.
And so I'll get back to Bullet Train, but you raised something that I wanted to jump on really quick, talking about when you were younger, a kid growing up, like your neighbor was a film composer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for most people that I talk to that become film, TV, media composers, like they don't even know that job exists for a
Right.
long time. You know, they see a movie and they hear the music, but like they think that music already exists, and then they're 20 and realize, oh no, this is someone's job. I want to do this.
Yeah.
So having that experience and that exposure earlier on, is that what opened your eyes to wanting to pursue this, or did you just always want to do some type of music and this is where you ended up?
It's sort of a combination of the two. I always wanted to do music. I mean, as a 3-year-old, I wanted to be like my dad and play the cello. And then, I started singing and wanted to be in bands and, wanted to be a singer-songwriter, rock star. And then, just the exposure to it, having Paul Pritchard, who was my next door neighbor, who did a lot of TV stuff. He, as I said, would bring me over to do vocals and things. He was also really instrumental in helping me get into the Royal Academy of Music to study composition. He was amazing. He sort of took me under his wing, as well as having Rupert Gregson-Williams, who took me under his wing as well. So I had a lot of exposure to the film world. When I was a teenager, my dad started doing sessions. Like he started recording on big film scores. So there was that as well. So it was like the stars were aligning for me to get into this world. And then from knowing Paul and meeting Rupert, and that ball kept kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then eventually moved out here, met Hans, and the story goes on.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's a combination of two. It's wanting to be in music and exposure to the film world.
Very cool, very interesting. And we can jump back into some of that background and your journey into film music in a bit, but I'll take us back in a Bullet Train. And so, like, candidly, the score is just it's really weird. I mean, it is, because you so rarely have things that are effectively, like original songs or renditions like that are actually part of the score.
Right.
And so it's unconventional, and I think it's even more unconventional for like a big mainstream action film, which is like really cool, because I love when broader focused things actually are pushing more and more rather than like being set in something. But was there ever a pushback from David as far as your approach and what you were doing, and the genres you were jumping around in, or was it very much like you've got our trust, go wild?
The second one, and even more so. I mean, David couldn't have been. I mean, he's just a gem to work with. It was just like nothing was off the table. He encouraged me to go even bigger. I keep saying this in interviews, but he really did. He was swing for the fences, and if it's too big, I'll bring you back. But yeah, I mean, the collaboration with Dave was second to none. He was so trusting and supportive, and gave me free reign, and wanted something different. He wanted something wacky and gonzo and weird to match his gonzo movie.
Yeah.
From the start, we were both like, we want to create something that's really different. It's 2022. We're not gonna change, reinvent the wheel here. But by combining elements that haven't been combined before, we can come up with something that feels new and fresh. And the last thing we wanted to do is come up with, that same old action score that we've all heard and we've all seen. So, the green light was there to go do something different. And being on before they even shot a frame, gave me the time, gave me the experimentation time to really kind of go through every single idea and really figure out what's cool and what isn't and what's working. And I'd get dailies every day, and then, you know, things would change, and there's so much stuff on the cutting room floor that we all loved, but it just ended up not fitting with the film. But I mean, I could gush all day about Dave and Kelly and how amazing they are to work with, and you know, hopefully we get to do many more together. But it was just a phenomenal experience to be given that trust and to feel like a filmmaker. You know, so often you're just the musician that, you know, do the notes and be quiet.
Yeah.
But no, I really felt like a voice at the table. I really felt like I could come with ideas, whether it was musically or from a film perspective, giving my opinion on whatever. And it would be heard, and it would be thought about, and that's really rare. So yeah, as I say, I could keep gushing, but let's probably move on to other questions.
So was that the first time that you'd been brought in that early into the process?
I had a similar experience on Kingsman, the Kingsman with Matthew Margeston. Matt was actually stuck on Rocket Man. He was doing Rocket Man, so Matthew Vaughn wanted to bring in someone to kind of write suites and you know, get the ball rolling early. So he had me get together a mobile rig, and I was literally next to the set, so he could like walk in off set, have a listen, and walk off. I think it happened probably in the 4 months of shooting. It happened maybe twice, but at the beginning of it was really cool because I'd never been on set, and you know, my rig hadn't arrived yet, so I was just sort of there hanging out watching them film. So it was beneficial from that aspect, but it wasn't quite as collaborative as what happened with David. You know, when you film anything, it's always a bit mental, and directors don't want to be thinking about music to the point of like giving notes and doing stuff. So that's why this process works so well, because I would just be creating stuff and sending him things, and at his leisure he could be like, oh, I'll listen to this, and then oftentimes he'd be like, oh, I'm going to play this on set and like give the vibe and things. Whether it was the White Death Suite or whatever it was, he would sort of, I mean, it's just so cool. Like I've never heard of that before. You know, a director getting a suite and then playing it on set to give his characters the vibe of what he wants. So yeah, just a really cool process.
Yeah, I love that, because it does seem so much more collaborative than the film being more or less done and you come in for 8 weeks at the end to put something together and then send it off, and then, you know, you're out of the picture again.
I mean, there's pros to that, there's pluses to that, but you know, when you're really going for something that is going to change it up, that's not, you know, that process doesn't really work when you've only got 8 weeks to come up with something groundbreaking. It's like, well, you know, not even the best albums in the world were made in that short time. So, and that's what this was really. It was sort of a concept album from start to finish.
So coming in that early, you know, before anything was even shot, what was the first thing that you did, or how did you kind of get into the mindset of what this music was going to be like, and what did you start working on first?
Well, I read the script before I had the interview for the gig, and then so it was a sort of a weird process of getting the gig to start with. I got the call saying that David and Kelly wanted to meet, so I sort of went into panic mode and was like, I've got to prepare. And so I started putting together like almost like a mood board or like a Pinterest of like basically, having read the script, the possibilities of genres and the music and directions we could go in. And then I had my first meeting. I didn't unveil the mood board yet, and I just sort of I teased the idea, and we were just generally talking about, you know, tone and everything, and it went really well. And then they wanted to see the mood board. So then the second meeting, I went through all these tracks, and at no point was I going, oh, we should use this in the film, or, you know, we should. It was more like, look at the possibilities. Isn't music amazing? We could do anything we want. So, and they loved that. They really loved it. And by the end of that meeting, they were like, we want to work with you. We want to get you sorted. Which I didn't quite believe for about a week, until my agent called and said, you got it. And then from that point on, I met with David, and the first thing I actually did was write La Despedida, the montage, the Wolf montage song. I think at one point it was supposed to be like this sort of old traditional song, and then Dave had the idea of, why don't you try something here? It should feel very bespoke to this moment, and go for it. And I don't know if it was a test or whatever, but I dived in head first, and I created La Despedida, and I did the scratch track, and I don't speak Spanish, so I was like, I had help from friends with the lyrics and stuff, and I couldn't get. They were adamant they wanted this like weathered, really kind of passionate voice, and my voice is kind of, well, it's quite high for one, and it's quite pure. So, I reached for the tequila, and you would just keep singing it and singing it and singing it, and then eventually I got this gruff voice, and there was, polished it up, sent it off, and they loved it, and we were off to the races from that point on. So then from then I moved into the more kind of like film music stuff. And it was the Fate material that I moved on to, and I was just experimenting. I just wanted to, we'd spoken about on the meeting, what if we found a sample and we used that as the basis for the score, and I would build everything around it. And obviously I would have to come up with that sample, but so that's what I was doing. I was coming up with the sample. The Fate material is kind of like that 70s record that I found, and I just started building that and just sort of, throwing stuff at the wall, see what would stick. And it turned into this 7-minute long, diarrhea of ideas that I sent him, and he was super into it. And we started putting that. There was no temp on this film, so we just started. I started just temping with original stuff, which was just amazing. If I had the time on every film, I'd do it, because you just like, temp love is a real thing. So if the temp love is for something that I've created for the director, you're in a win-win. So actually there were no instances. It was always like, we want this to evolve a bit more here and do that. So, but the process was great. I mean, as I said, just like throwing ideas at the wall, sending to Dave, he'd give me thoughts. And more often than not, the thoughts were like, this is awesome, which is great. And then there was a little moment where we started doing previews where the tone of the bad guys, the tone of the White Death and tone of Prince had to shift to a bit more of a fun on the dial. It needed to be a bit more fun. So with the White Death, I kept those scary elements, but added sort of 12-string guitars and more rock elements. The more 70s influence came in there too. And then with Prince, it was sort of really leaning into that sort of 90s comeback Gen Z sound. But the cool thing about that is with Prince, I got to keep the old theme too, because she's such a psycho. She's got these two sides to her, where she's like super psycho and then very charming and sweet. So you've got that like the two ideas, and then fortunately for me, they work together. So that was kind of a cool finding that out, that they would work was cool, and I could keep both things. So. I mean, I could go on and on about the process.
You know what? If you're going to keep talking, I can go out and grab a drink, and you just.
There's the minutia and the detail that went into every single character, and just because I cared so much and I was so into the project and so into the collaboration, that every little thing had to be perfect.
Well, and I think that's something that really stands out, because the film structure is that you have a number of these like recurring main and side characters that are, throughout the whole length. And then you'll have someone like the Wolf, who is basically in for a, 10-minute section.
Right, if that.
He shows up, you get the backstory, and then, like, there's his scene. Mm-hmm. And so how did you balance having those themes for characters running throughout the film, as well as having these kind of, like, one-off characters where you have to define who they are musically without it sounding like completely disparate from the rest of the film?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the whole kind of concept album came into it, because little elements of things would sort of leak, whether it was an instrumentation thing or a melodic thing, they would leak into other characters. The Wolf is kind of, there's a tiny little bit of the Wolf that happens in the action stuff at the end, where Brad pulls out the knife and you get a little bit of a memory of him. But with all the other characters, it was like, I would leave little Easter eggs with Prince, because... Are we doing spoilers?
Sure. I'll warn everyone.
Well, the fact that she is the White Death's daughter, I would leave little Easter eggs of just little bits of the White Death motif within her material. And then that kind of Fate material is sort of with everyone. The high string stuff, and the main theme comes in a couple of versions with Tangerine. It's sort of everything's just cross pollinating throughout the whole thing without you really realizing, because the genres are so different. You're not necessarily picking up that, oh, that's the Fate theme, but Tamio Okuda singing it, or that's the string line, but that's over Prince, or that. So I was constantly trying to weave that through, so you didn't feel, although it's like, flicking through a greatest hits album and every track's different. There is a through line that helps you kind of that brings you to the end, where you do get that more kind of cinematic. I mean, I hope it's not generic, but it definitely feels more film music-y when when the train's crashing and towards the end when the orchestra's massive. And, I went from recording at Capital B for the more character intimate stuff, and then as soon as we got to Reel 6, I went to record in Sony with a huge orchestra. So you get that change of perspective. You get that big explosion of orchestra. So, yeah, it is all over the place, but I think the combination of melody and instrumentation and that sample, basically, that 70 sample that gets, sewn through everything, helps it all connect.
Well, and you mentioned a lot of those things maybe not being noticeable on a first listen or first watch, let's say, but how, like, what do you want the audience to get from it? Is there ever an expectation of, like, when they talk about a bit of the Wolf, like, musicality coming in near the end when Brad Pitt has the knife? Like, is there an expectation that there will be an overt connection, or is it just kind of working in the subconscious?
I think working in the subconscious. I think there's an element that if people are noticing it when it goes by, I'm not really doing my job properly, because they should be watching. They should be, like, going along with the ride. But I think it's the subconscious. So when you get to the end of the ride, you're like, oh, that was crazy, but it kind of worked. And then obviously when you go back and listen to the soundtrack, you can kind of pick those things out. And that's why I left those Easter eggs there. But honestly, just like the most fun type of score to work on, and just like throw all the rules out the window, and just like have fun with everything, and just, whatever genre took me that day, I was like, oh, let's ride with that. Let's see if that works. Let's mix this genre with that genre. Or so yeah, it's wacky, but I think it's all tied together by that, like, finding the sample and putting it through everything.
Yeah, and I think you watch the film, you get to the end. There's never a moment, at least when I was watching, where I was like, this music is coming out of nowhere, and I don't understand how it fits in at all. Mm-hmm. And but again, like, I listened to the score first, and that's where I was like, whoa, I have no clue how this all fits together, because there's so many pieces across, I don't know, like 55 minutes. But it so caught my interest because I wanted to see how it actually worked. And, like, it is gonzo and, like, weird and unconventional, but it does work.
Yeah, why not? I would much rather people say it's weird and gonzo and that it works, or that it's weird and gonzo and it doesn't work and they don't like it. I mean, I'm at a point now where I'd much rather people have a strong reaction to my music rather than, it's all right. That's like the worst thing when someone says that. So,
Well, like you said, it very much could have just been a, like, straightforward action score that we're all used to, and it wouldn't have been bad. It would have, like, functionally worked, and you could have fit themes in. But in a sense, with how out there and quirky the movie is, it wouldn't have made sense at all to have something just, like, straight-laced and straightforward.
Yeah, I think it would have been as you say, it would have worked fine, because the performance is by all the actors and the direction is amazing. So, a more traditional way of doing that would have been fine. But it was just such an opportunity to just go nuts and to just elevate these characters with music, and to really have a feeling that music plays a big role in the film, because I think, for me personally, we've lost that a little bit in the last 10 years. I think, towards the end of the 80s and especially in the 90s, soundtracks were massive. Like, you would run out to get the latest soundtrack because you'd heard it in a movie. And whether that's happened on this or not, I don't know. But that was certainly the goal, to sort of bring that feeling back of watching a film and hearing a really cool song that you didn't know and go, oh, I want to go find that. And whether that, and extra cool, I've had a couple people contact me and going, I'm trying to find the song that happens when the train pulls into the station and I can't find it. And then someone else will go, oh yeah, well, that's actually the score by Dominic Lewis. You should go check it out. So, I mean, that was kind of the goal, to sort of, straddle that line and for it to be kind of obscured between score and song. So that was really cool to see.
Well, and that experience, does it ever feel a little surreal? Because, I mean, like you said, the last 10 years, maybe you don't get that as much. But, like, I don't know. I feel like if you're, joining a rock band, for instance, or starting one, like, that's something where people are coming to listen to you, or they're buying your CD. Mm-hmm. But obviously, if you're composing for film or TV, you're in like very much a secondary role. Like, it isn't about you. You're there, building something up and collaborating.
Right.
Like, does that interaction feel surreal, where someone is coming like out to you and being like, "This is such a cool track. Like, I love this track."
It's a very cool experience, especially for someone who, as a kid, wanted to be that guy who was, playing Wembley Stadium and in a rock band. And it's something that I think should be more of a common occurrence with film composers, because so many talented, amazing people write these amazing scores, and they sort of they're doing their job and they get forgotten about. So, there's certain colleagues of mine that do have that rock star status, but it's always nice. It's always nice to be validated in that way, where someone's gone, oh, that's a really awesome song. Oh, it's the composer, and then that kind of snowballs, and that's cool, because it's oftentimes, as you say, we're just sort of behind the camera and out the way. And for the most part, I'm cool with that. But it's always nice to get a little pat on the back sometimes.
Well, and I don't know if Hans has ever played Wembley, but like, that's someone where like he's doing like full on big ass concerts, showing up, in his guitar right in the front, right. And like I think it's cool, but it's also just like, I don't know, it feels so weird to see.
I think it's awesome, and you know what? If anyone was going to do rock concerts, it should be Hans, because, I mean, the guy has literally not only changed film music umpteen times, but changed his own sound umpteen times with still being Hans, and it's quite an incredible achievement. It's one thing for people like Tom Newman and John Williams and Alan Silvestri to have their sound with an orchestra, or sound with, with Tom Newman, it's like lots of different kinds of instruments and however they've come up with their sound. But for someone like Hans to start with the sort of Rain Man Driving Miss Daisy stuff, and then the Days of Thunder, and then to mix it up into like full Wagnerian sort of gladiator rock, the rock stuff, to then move it to, I mean, it's like every decade he reinvents himself. It's incredible. Much like a rock artist, much like a band that has tried the test of time, and have to sort of reinvent themselves in 10 years. And he's done that. And I still haven't been able to get to a show, but I would love to see it. I've seen them all. They look amazing online. But fair play to him. I'd be doing the same thing if I were him.
I mean,
must be such a rush.
Can't you get backstage passes or something, having worked for RCP before?
I mean, maybe I'll have to hit him up. I haven't seen him with the pandemic and everything, I haven't seen him in such a long time. But I would love to go see a show, because everyone just raves about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. Everything that I've seen, I haven't seen it, but every clip that I see like looks just like a true wild performance. Just like an experience. And
what incredible music as well. I mean, like, what better?
Yeah.
You get all the visuals, plus you get this incredible music that he's created over, 40 years now? I don't even know, but a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But talking about him reinventing himself, like, is that something that you're ever looking towards in the future of being like, ooh, I need to make sure that I'm keeping my sound fresh. Like I don't want to be doing the same sort of music 10, 20, 30 years from now.
Totally. I mean, I think there's always a constant. I think the orchestra will always keep me constant. Um, trying to sound like Ravel or trying to sound like Debussy is always gonna. I'm always gonna have that side of me, which comes in handy when you're doing like Christmas movies and things that need to be with an orchestra. But for things like Bullet Train and other kind of cool shows and films, I do want to keep mixing it up. I mean, I have such an eclectic taste in music. I want to be able to sort of flex all those muscles and, find those combinations that people haven't found yet. Break those rules that people haven't broken yet. That's a huge Zimmer philosophy. Like he's all about breaking rules. His whole sound is about breaking rules. And yeah, it's important to me. I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm just churning out the same thing. And I think today, if you look at my IMDb, there's not many things that are that similar on there. It's all kind of a bit nuts, but that keeps me sane. The nuts nature of my IMDb page keeps me sane and keeps me thinking of fresh ideas and moving my sound forward. I hope.
Well, yeah, I mean, you listen to Bullet Train and then go and listen to Peter Rabbit 2.
Right.
It's like
yeah, very different.
Two totally different things.
Yeah. And I want to keep doing that. I want to keep doing kid stuff. I want to keep doing grown-up stuff. And I want to just, because I think if we do anything for too long, then it'll get stale. Whether you're eating the same lunch every day, you're going to get bored of it. So I want to keep doing different things, different types of animation, different types of kid stuff, different types of action, I haven't done like real kind of thrillers yet. I'd love to do that, like really get stuck into a psychological thriller. They tend to be like thriller action stuff that I've done so far, but yeah, there's so many possibilities, and it's so exciting to be, well, it's kind of cool, like that. I mean, I don't think it's arrogant, but I have the confidence that I think I can do any of that stuff. I've had the training and I've had the mentors to put me in a position to be able to do that. So it's exciting to sort of have new genres on the horizon that I haven't touched yet.
Well, I think that's almost necessary in some ways for the field where, unless you're a huge name and like you just kind of do the style that you want, like, you take a lot of like Reznor and Ross scores where like they've got their sound, but like they're superstars and like they can get away with doing that sound.
Right.
Like a lot of people don't have that leeway. So you've got to either like be able to kind of dabble in everything or at least have the confidence to be like, oh yeah, I can definitely do that. And then scramble and like work your ass off to actually get that done.
Yeah, 100%. And you know what? You're absolutely right. I think that sort of monopolization of sound comes when you're successful and people want that.
Yeah.
And that's again another tip of the cap to Zimmer is that he's had so many of those, but yeah, he's like, well, I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to do something different. So, yeah, I'm not as successful as those guys, so I don't know whether I'll be getting the calls to be like, I need you to do that thing. But if that does happen, I will always try and mix it up.
Yeah, well, they've had quite a head start on you, so
true, that's true. Yeah,
and I brought it up tangentially with Peter Rabbit too, but you mentioned wanted to do more animation as well, or continue to do that, and things directed at kids too. Do you think that like people tend to like underestimate or like underappreciate the music that comes out of like something that's animated for kids?
Oh, that's a really tricky question. I'm not sure if it's a conscious thing. I think you've got that. There's something in that because obviously it's not so readily available for adults. And I think it takes something sort of really special for it to prick up the ears of an adult musically. But then again, I think it kind of has to be in a musical world for that to happen. You look at the success of things like Frozen and Moana, and yes, they're huge with kids, but the adults love them too, and they've certainly played in my house many, many, many times. So Yeah, it's a tricky one. And I've done animated scores that I'm proud of that no one's ever heard, other than watching the thing. It's not like you're going to watch a Monsters at Work episode and go listen to the score if you're 52. Um, maybe some people do. I don't know, but you've definitely got a point. But I couldn't put my finger on why. I don't. For all of my colleagues and people that do this, oftentimes some of that music is the most complex and the most difficult to write. So it doesn't really seem fair that it's not getting the as big a spotlight as the adult movies. But I don't know. It's a really good question. I don't have an answer for you. Really, just waffled nothingness there. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. I mean, in one sense, I almost wonder for myself too, because, and I do think it's true that it's a subconscious thing, because sometimes I'll listen to like an animated for kids score and be like, oh wow, that was actually really good, and then I stop and I'm like, wait, why am I saying, like, why do I feel surprised at that?
Right.
Like, why should that movie have, like, why do I expect it to have any lesser music than anything else? And
Yeah,
like,
and as I
it
was
doesn't
saying,
make any
oftentimes it's
sense.
more complex. And I listen to a lot of animated stuff, and I'm a bias. I'm not one to be referenced here because I love it and I do it. So anytime I'm watching stuff with the kids and I hear really good music, I always go check it out. So I mean, a lot of that stuff is phenomenal. And yeah, as I said, I can't really put my finger on why it doesn't get as much PR as the other stuff, but there are certain things that do. It tends to be Pixar related,
Yeah.
but there's so much. There's so many shows that my kids watch, and I'll be cooking or I'll be or just around the house, and the mix will be good, and I'll be like, that's really cool. There's like a few shows that they watch. I'm like, wait a minute, that music's really great. So yeah, everyone's just doing their bit, I guess. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. I keep waffling. I don't have an answer.
No, but it's still it's good insight. So I appreciate it. Even if there isn't a concise, like, this is the reason why, which
Right.
it's too like abstract to have that type of answer anyways.
Yeah, I mean, not to labour the point, but I think most adults, when you find something that is similar to what you would listen to in your car without your kids, if a film score is somewhat evoking that, they're more likely to put that on than they are, The Incredibles. You know what I mean? Unless they want to, get to their kids' school on time. But I think if it's closer to what their music library would be, that's probably why the non-kid stuff gets more light than the other stuff. There you go. I found an answer eventually.
There we go. So listen, Dom, but before we wrap up, I did want to ask if you could talk a little bit, even if it's just an anecdote about your time working at Remote Control Productions. I mean, it's something that so many people are interested in, and it's
Right.
obviously like with Hans at the top, but also the sheer amount of like huge names that have come through. Like it's just had such a big effect on like modern film music, TV music, but
Yeah.
like we don't necessarily get a lot of peeks behind the curtain to like see
Right.
what's going on.
I mean, I'm not quite, you just want anecdotes? Like, I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you could talk about the experience, give an anecdote about working there, anything like that.
Sure. I mean, listen, RCP is, I always say it's the best university you could ever go to. I mean, I did 4 years at the Royal Academy of Music, and I learnt more in a month at RCP than I did in 4 years. That's not quite true, but it just in terms of like not necessarily like music related things, just stuff that it was so important that me sitting here, and I'll probably talk to a director later today, or and I'll have a meeting or whatever, and just those skills that you just never get taught in college. I left college, and then within 6 months, I was sitting in a room with Ramin Djawadi, Jeff Sinelli, Mike Hyam, and then a couple months later it was John Powell, Hans, Jeff Sinelli, Lorne Bow, and it's just like you're just surrounded by all this talent, and and you just sort of become a sponge as a kid. I was very lucky to sort of go straight into an additional music role, and I'd done my little stint with John before all this on How to Train Your Dragon, which was incredible. And John is a complete genius, and that whole experience was very daunting. And I spent most of it sort of flicking through Ravel, going, "Oh my God, this has got to be better. I've got to do this better. What would Ravel do?" But remote control is just this it's this competitive but supportive atmosphere. It's very difficult to describe because everyone's obviously trying to get to be in the chair and do their thing. But at the same time, everyone's very supportive, and we all know that we're all in it together. You'd leave at, I'd be there till God knows when in the wee small hours of the morning, but then everyone else would, in those days. Like, you'd go out to your car, and then you'd spend another 2 hours talking to everyone else that was doing the same thing. And just like you'd walk out to the car park and you'd see Tom Holkenberg, Atlia Verison, Ramin Javadi, and like you've got all these like heavy hitters, and to a certain extent they were back then when I was there. And you're just sort of learning and absorbing, and and then in the event that you do work on a Hans movie and you're in those meetings, I mean, those are like, as a kid, as a sort of 20-year-old at college, I never would have dreamed of being in that, like, his boudoir, that amazing room. That's daunting enough as it is. But then just listening to a master, like not only a master of music, but a master of film too. He's so knowledgeable, and the way he takes a meeting and the way he makes directors and execs feel comfortable, and being exposed to that as a 24-year-old or whatever I was just like gold. You just don't get that, no matter how good your teacher is at whatever academy you're at. You're just never gonna get the best in the business talking to a Gore Verbinski or whoever it might have been on any specific day. And then you throw a Powell into that, and you throw a Jackman into that, and you throw like all these people that are under the same roof. I think that's why everyone succeeds from there. Other than the huge support from Hans, and so many people have been given those breadcrumbs from him, and he's just like such a nurturing, supportive guy to his. If you put the work into him, he's going to give it back. But yeah, I mean, those names I've mentioned, and there's way more. Before I left, my corridor was Matthew Margeson, then me, and Alan Meissen was over the corridor, then Heitor Pereira, and Henry Jackman down the end. And there's one more I'm forgetting. I can't remember who I'm forgetting. I'm forgetting someone. But I mean, and that's just one building in RCB. So whenever you go out your room, it's like, oh, hey, and you start talking about stuff. What are you working on? And, especially with someone like Matt, who I'm really close with, we would always go into each other's room and be like, hey, what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on this. Hey, would you mind giving a listen to this? And, and it's like, we obviously want to be doing it ourselves, but we're there, we support each other as well. And then obviously we ended up scoring The King's Man together, which we'd always wanted to do a co-write together. So, I wouldn't be here talking to you if it wasn't for remote control. Like with any job, there are highs and lows, but just it's. I mean, I don't know what it's like now, but when I was there, it was a very hard but special place to work in, and it definitely separated the men from the boys. But it was invaluable. I literally wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't gone there.
I mean, I don't know. That's great, and I appreciate the reminiscing about it. It's just really cool to hear.
It was tough to leave. It was tough to leave because you do have that support system. But my family was growing, and I needed to sort of take care of business at home and stuff. But it is an amazing support system, and you can just kind of pull from so many different things. And there's always someone at 2 a.m. getting a coffee that you can kind of like have therapy with for a bit, and then go back and write your cues. As I say, I think with COVID, maybe that's not quite the atmosphere now. But definitely when I was there, it was pretty cool. Actually, it was a very one-off experience that not many people will have.
Yeah. Well, on that, perfect place to end it.
Okay, cool.
Just, I don't know, it's awesome hearing about it. And once again, Dom, I appreciate you joining me to talk about Bullet Train, RCP, your upcoming work, everything.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And I'm looking forward to those scores later this year.
Oh, yeah, they're fun. They're fun. They will... It's too much Christmas for me right now, but I've got to get through it.